This is one of those stories that if they try to make a movie about it, they'll intentionally ruin it because the truth seems that unbelievable. Today, we're talking about how the United States military and CIA use Vietnam Sasquatch, ghostly voices, and vampires to combat communism. Communism is a word that sparks debate, revolution, and in some cases, war. But what is it and why has it played such a central role in shaping the conflicts of the 20th century?
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it.
At its core, communism is a vision of a world without classes. No rich, no poor. Instead, everything, land, resources, and even factories are collectively owned by everyone. Everyone contributes what they can and receives what they need. This sounds amazing, but in practice, this vision has been complicated. Economic insufficiency, corruption, and the suppression of freedoms have plagued every single attempt to bring communism to life. Instead of creating a utopia, like any great form of government, the regimes turn into oppressive states and typically end in genocide. Yet, despite its flaws, communism inspired millions across the globe, particularly in the mid-20th century. Nowhere was this more apparent than where Forrest Gump became a war hero: Vietnam.
Tell us a little bit about the war, man.
War in Vietnam?
War in Viet-fucking-Nam!
A nation caught in the crossfire of ideology, war, and now due to films, nostalgia. It's bad enough that your grandpa developed cancer and other diseases due to Agent Orange, but now he can relive those memories with Zac Efron delivering beer in Vietnam. Isn't that fun? Speaking of fun, if you all could spend 10 seconds in the comments and help me combat the broken YouTube algorithm and just comment something about Sasquatch, Vietnam, or whatever brain rot the algorithm loves, I would greatly appreciate it. Now back to Nam. To understand the Vietnam War, we first have to understand the global tug-of-war between communism and capitalism. This wasn't just a battle of armies. It was a clash of ideas about how society should work, and the United States wanted to win at all costs. For Vietnam, this war was just as much about independence as it was ideology. For the US, it was a line in the sand. Another stage in a larger, unending Cold War, and for the millions who lived through it, it was a tragedy of unimaginable scale. First, let's step back and consider the forces that shaped it. The roots of the conflict trace back to Vietnam's struggle for independence from the French colonial rule. By the mid-20th century, a charismatic leader named Ho Chi Minh emerged at the forefront. Literally emerged from a cave, that's where he planned a lot of his stuff. But he was rallying his people with promises of unity and freedom under a communist government. Meanwhile, the world was in a deep, Cold War, a high-stakes chess match between the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. To Washington, D.C., Vietnam wasn't just another country fighting for independence, it was a potential domino in the spread of communism across Asia. The infamous domino theory suggested that if Vietnam fell to communism, the rest of Southeast Asia would follow suit. This ideological battle pulled the United States into a brutal, decades-long war that pitted their superior military might against guerrilla tactics. You would think we would learn from what we did in the American Revolution, but apparently not. This war was fought in the dense jungles of Vietnam against a deeply motivated Vietnamese resistance. This war wasn't just fought solely with guns and bombs, though. Both sides employed psychological warfare, propaganda, and even used folklore against the others. The Vietnam War wasn't just a clash of weapons. It was a clash of cultures, beliefs, and strategies. An effort by both sides to shape the world in their image. And like all wars, its effects rippled beyond the battlefield, leaving scars that remain visible to this day. One of the most interesting pieces of the Vietnam War is folklore that was passed down but never fully understood. Specifically, there's one mystery that has never been explained. Troops from both sides often reported exchanging blows with a group of human-like creatures that had reddish-brown hair and ape-like features. Strangely, there isn't a single known species of ape in Vietnam. Picture this. It's the height of the Vietnam War. The jungle is alive with danger. Not just enemy troops, but from something else entirely. American soldiers speak in hushed tones about encounters with a massive, ape-like creature. The locals call them Batutut, but to the GIs, they're simply known as Rock Apes. These creatures were reportedly seen by both American and Vietnamese soldiers, often in the mountainous regions of central Vietnam. Described as standing between 3 to 7 feet tall and covered in reddish-brown hair, they possessed disturbingly human-like features. The Rock Apes weren't just passive observers, however. There's many accounts that claim that they were aggressive and they threw rocks at soldiers. There's even stories of how they returned live grenades that were thrown into the brush. These mysterious and allegedly violent humanoid creatures were reportedly sighted numerous times through the Vietnam War. Our record of these sightings spans from 1955 to 1975. Accounts of encounters with these beings primarily come from the American soldiers, GIs, who upon returning from their deployment shared their unsettling experiences in the dense jungles of Vietnam.
I had grenades thrown at me by a monkey.
One of the most infamous hotspots for Rock Ape activity was in an area nicknamed Monkey Mountain. In 1966, the 3rd Marines erected a base near Da Nang City in the jungle-covered Dong Din Mountains. The Marines reported attacks by unidentified animals that threw rocks not only into the compound but at the soldiers, injuring some of the Marines. The Marines gave them the nickname Rock Apes, and Dong Din became known as Monkey Mountain. Soldiers stationed there continued to frequently report strange encounters. One GI recounted a harrowing night when his unit was bombarded by rocks from an unseen assailant. He reported that a small, Bigfoot-like creature, possibly a child, approached his group of soldiers. Once it realized it was spotted, it sprinted up the mountain, and some other creature started to roll boulders down the mountain toward the soldiers. Another claimed to have witnessed a group of these creatures walking upright on 2 legs through the jungle, seemingly unfazed by the war raging around them. In 1969, a patrol from the 502nd Infantry Regiment encountered 8 Rock Apes on Molten Ridge that came walking down the trail. Mistaking their brown fur for Vietnam Army uniforms, they opened fire. One male charged the US soldiers while the other 7 Rock Apes retreated. This is similar behavior to silverback gorillas, where the alpha will try to charge a threat to allow the other people in the group to retreat and survive. These sightings weren't isolated, however. Some reports were so compelling that in 1974, North Vietnamese General Hiong Minh Ta organized an expedition to find the creatures. Though the mission yielded no conclusive evidence, this highlights just how widespread the beliefs in these beings had become. So, what were these Rock Apes? Skeptics argue that they were simply misidentified animals. Vietnam is home to species like northern white-cheeked gibbons, while much smaller could be mistaken for humanoid figures in the dense jungle. Others suggest that these sightings were exaggerated under the extreme stress of combat, fueled by fear, exhaustion, and the hallucinogenic effects of certain plants or military-issued substances. But not all explanations are so mundane. Some researchers point to the possibility of this being an undiscovered group of primates, or something similar to Bigfoot or the Yeti. There is also a darker theory. Could these sightings have been part of psychological warfare? During the Vietnam War, both sides employed psychological warfare to undermine the enemy's morale. Could reports of Rock Apes have been fabricated or exaggerated as part of this effort? Imagine the psychological toll on soldiers who believed that they were fighting not just against human adversaries, but an unknown, terrifying force lurking in the jungle. Declassified documents revealed that both the United States and the Viet Cong experimented with unconventional tactics to destabilize their opponents. Could Rock Apes have been an unintentional byproduct of these operations, or were they something else entirely? Psychological warfare is the use of psychological techniques to manipulate emotions, attitudes, and behaviors of opponents during a war. During the Vietnam War, the United States engaged in psychological warfare numerous times, so this was not a new tactic. Among the most chilling tactics the United States used was something straight out of a horror movie: Operation Wandering Soul. The Vietnamese culture, like most, holds a deep reverence for their dead. According to their beliefs, a soul denied a proper burial is doomed to wander the earth in pain and suffering. These wandering souls, or spirits improperly buried, are said to haunt the places where they died. The US military decided to turn this cultural belief into a weapon. Their plan? To exploit the fear of restless spirits to demoralize the Viet Cong. Engineers spent weeks crafting what can only be described by me as nightmare fuel. They recorded eerie wails, Buddhist funeral music, and unsettling dialogue that they had voiced by South Vietnamese soldiers for authenticity. The most infamous of these recordings that we're about to listen to is Ghost Tape number 10. Let's take a listen. Now, I don't know if you speak Vietnamese, but I sure don't, so here's the translated version of what that says. That clip that we just listened to says, "My body is gone. I am dead. My family. Tragic, how tragic. My friends, I come back to you to let you know I am dead. I am dead. I am in hell. Friends, while you're still alive, go home. Go home, my friends, before it's too late." These tapes were typically blasted from helicopters or loudspeakers that were planted throughout the Vietnamese forest at night, creating a ghostly atmosphere that preyed on the Viet Cong's fear of wandering souls. Imagine being in a pitch-black jungle, hearing what sounds like the voice of your dead comrade, warning you to leave before you met the same fate. I don't know about you, but I'd be doing the Scooby-Doo run to get out of there. I don't think my feet would be fast enough. The effectiveness of these tapes, however, was hit or miss. When the Viet Cong realized that the recordings were fake, their immediate response would be to open fire on the speakers. While doing this did expose their hidden position, the psychological impact was harder to measure. Some US reports insisted that the operation was a success, but the evidence proving that is very thin at best. However, the United States terrorizing their enemies with horror movie tropes didn't end there.
Nosferatu!
The CIA attempted to convince the Philippines that vampires were roaming around the countryside to also help them combat communism in that country. No, we're not talking about some supernatural Black Ops division, though that would be an amazing movie. Hollywood, make that. This is actually a psychological warfare tactic employed by the CIA in the Philippines in the 1950s. The mastermind behind the strategy was Lieutenant Colonel Edward G. Lansdale, a man whose career would define modern psychological warfare. When Lansdale was sent to the Philippines to suppress the Huck Insurgency, a communist guerrilla group in the Philippines, he decided that bullets and bombs weren't enough. Instead, he tapped into Filipino folklore, including the terrifying myth of the Aswang. Now, for those who aren't familiar, the Aswang is a vampiric creature in Filipino mythology. It's said to stalk the countryside, draining its victims of blood, and its legend was perfect for Lansdale's plan. Lansdale's team devised a chilling ruse. They abducted a Huck fighter operating in the dense jungles, and then under the cover of darkness, they killed him, punctured his neck in 2 places to mimic fang marks, drained the blood from his body, and then left his lifeless corpse where his fellow soldiers would find it. Imagine being one of those fighters. You stumble upon a comrade, pale as a ghost, with vampire bites on his neck. The fear of the Aswang would do what the military force couldn't do by themselves. Terrify the Huck rebels into abandoning the area. The only thing scarier than a person with a gun is an undead creature that stalks you in the night. This is a chilling reminder of the lengths the government will go to during ideological war. I mean, weaponizing vampires to fight communism, that is some next level geopolitical horror. It makes you wonder though, what other legends could have been exploited in the shadows of history? Could the Rock Apes of Vietnam have been folklore weaponized by the United States government? Or were they undiscovered primates? Were they misidentified animals, or were they something else born from the chaos of war? Whatever the truth is, these stories remind us of the thin line between myth and reality. If you enjoyed exploring this mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss another episode of The Other Side. And let us know in the comments down below, what do you think the Rock Apes were? Good night, sleep tight, and don't let the Aswang bite.